be at the same conference. So this is kind of like a little halftime show, I would say, in the project. That's why we're taking it.
That's right.
So in the first half.
What action happened in the first half, Dave?
Right. Well,
how about those running backs?
The first half, you know, Dan thought we were much farther along than Dave thought we were.
Or Dan was trying to get us there, probably prematurely, I think.
Well, yeah.
See, where I came at it, I think we've ended up at the same spot. So I think this reset is a good idea, and it'll all be a happy ending. But I ended up at the same spot you did, but from a different direction. I agree with you philosophically, and also the way the brain responds. Where I was coming from is pure user research.
What can we communicate?
And if we fail, that's knowledge, that's data.
Yeah, sure.
And in fact, I think that's one of the things I learned is you can't go completely on visual if you haven't quite got to. So you had the diagram Dave spoke the other day, and he has this great diagram where it's open, then there's examine or activities, and then it's closed. And we never. There's a real good question about where we are on that spectrum.
Yeah. So this is the diagram roughly.
Yeah.
Opening is about creating opportunities, exploring, and then closing.
And what I did is I came up to him after the presentation and said, we need to close. And he said, I don't think we've opened yet.
Yeah, right.
So I was like, okay, good. Well, we know where to start the conversation.
Well, what's interesting is, I think this is also an experiment in social dynamics. Because Dan and I have never even met. It's not like we know each other and we've had lots of conversations.
Right.
We've had tweets, We've had tweets basically back and forth. We don't know each other, so you were almost like cavemen.
That's right.
Coming up trying to talk, visual language.
Cavemen talking about physics.
Yeah. So it's been really interesting to look at the pictures. There's this the way I would describe it so far is I'm confident we're sort of talking about the same things, that we're in the same, relatively in the same, ballpark. We're in the same, roughly in the same zone, but it's frustrating.
I could tell you're getting frustrated.
You weren't getting frustrated?
I got frustrated with the very last thing Dave sent. I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not gonna do this anymore until I talk to him. Because it was like I kept trying to pull us towards. Actually, we've already dealt with it. I was trying to pull us towards close, and you were still exploring open. And when you have that kind of a disconnect, you're not going to get to a happy place. But the two things that came out of the back and forth that I really liked, and we included the work of other folks. I love this idea of communities as this globe that has this action going on inside of it, but then that there are a number of communities orbiting around everybody, and sometimes they're the same communities and sometimes they're not. The sort of static nature of diagramming communities and people are like included in it, or the static nature of it never worked for me. And that got me past sort of, there's movement inside, tons of movement inside, but there's also movement around an individual, and then obviously you pull back a little farther and you have a bunch of individuals with a bunch of things rotating around their heads.
Yeah.
I love that. And the other thing I liked is where we ended up with rhizomes, which I never really thought about. That things that appear to be not connected in any way, it's because you haven't seen down in the root structure that in fact they're completely intertwined. And from the idea of concepts and how we think about stuff, and if you drive, as I was driving a little too early, towards interfaces, I think that's fascinating. Now there are these connections, but it's not obvious in any way that they're connected.
We're going to embark on a project together. So I guess this is, in my head, okay, well first you have to kind of figure out what's the territory that you're kind of agree to work on. And without some kind of agreement about what area, what are we doing, there's no point in movement, you're proceeding. So I think we're the idea if the zone of inquiry is about interface design, which makes a lot of sense to me, then I could declare the opening closed.
Interesting. But now I'm going to play the other card.
Then there has to be some exploration of that.
But then let me play the other card, which is, I'm not that married to interfaces. If we don't want to do that,
there's this idea that the knowledge is this thing that kind of like a liquid. If I want to share it with you, I just kind of pour it into your head. And, now you know it. We've shared the knowledge. But it seems to me that you're actually, in the real world, knowledge does not exist independently of the languages in which you describe it or constitute it.
Yeah.
So you can only communicate your knowledge to another person if you can agree on what the words mean and on the language. It seems to me that UX is one of those disciplines where, and it's a good poster child for, well, it's a confluence of different disciplines coming together, each with their own language. So if you come from a library science background, you're going to have a way of structuring the knowledge, that if you come from a human-computer interaction or a cognitive science background, you're going to have another way of structuring the way that you think about,
So I'm digging it. The thing I can't do, and maybe you can do it for me, is connect that to the exercise. So one of the reasons I think I gravitated towards interface is that it was a problem that could be solved. And with language, I don't know how to say that. I mean, if it's just something loose like, people need a common language, that's not a problem to be solved. I'm being a little thick on this, I'm sorry.
I think it'd be fun if we took this and we put it up on YouTube and put it out to the world, as halftime show.
And then 5 people that give a crap about what we're talking about? Well,
yeah. I think, for me the goal.
I like that idea.
For me the goal is to explore visual language and what can and can't we do with it. For me, that's enough. That's something I have found in visual language, using visual language, and professionally in our work for many years, is that a circle by itself can, you can draw a circle and it can represent millions of things. It's not like a word. You draw a circle and you write, sun underneath it. Suddenly, it has an incredible amount of meaning that it didn't have before. You do a circle and you write, fat man underneath it. It's a completely different. That's all. In some ways, the building blocks are so basic in visual language. They're not as sophisticated as verbal language, I don't think. But what they are really good at is making things more concrete and making the relationships between them very explicit.
Human being solar system is.
For me, the target, if we're going to be up in front of people talking about this, for me the target is, if I'm in the audience and I'm watching Dan and Dave up there talking, here's what I want to know. Here's what I want to get. You guys draw a lot of pictures. You communicate visually a lot. You have a lot of thoughts about how to use visuals to communicate. I'm a UX designer, or I'm an information architect, or I'm just a Joe. I'm a guy. Tell me, when and where will visualization really supercharge my thinking and my communications?
If we took what we've done now, what would survive? It's okay if nothing does, but what we've done would survive that tells a UX designer in the audience when and where visualization will kick ass?
So far, the best thing has been this conversation.
Yeah. So screw drawings, visual language, it's all
videotape. Just have a conversation.
Just call us, basically. That's the answer. XPLANE.com. The idea of a map. Can we tie a map into UX designer when and where visualization takes place? Is there some sort of overlap between those two?
Map?
Because map is good for me.
Okay, let's decide what we want to map. Loose and part. Want to map the world of UX? Do we want to map
whatever we map, it could serve the purpose of a UX designer seeing when and where visualization could kick ass. Or we could go specifically to that.
Yeah, we map the north, south, east, and west of visualization, visual language. The visual language landscape.
And what's cool is where you started this, which is it's okay to have that as a target, and if we don't hit it, we will learn so much along the way.
I love that. I love the visual language landscape. If you think that's fun to explore, I would be all over that.
I'm on it. That's it. We're done. That's great.
High five. All right.
Happy hand.
Okay, it's time for the third quarter, second half.
Let's go back to the action.
Time for the second half.